It's about that time of the year, my favorite time of the year. The NFL season is days away, and we are almost there. We're going to kick things off this Thursday when the Kansas City Chiefs play host to the Baltimore Ravens in an AFC Championship rematch. Look, football season is here. It's definitely here, but we've got a couple of days before the season actually starts. And I felt like this was a good time to give my full predictions. Last week I gave you guys kind of what I felt like the NFC West was going to shake up to be. And I thought maybe I could get all my predictions for each division out before the season started. But I just didn't really feel like that was super realistic. I have a lot of things going on with life, work, things of that nature. So I thought, let me just try something else. Let me change the play at the line and do something else to where I'm going to now just kind of straight give my predictions. I already went through the schedule game. So these predictions are based on how I set up the schedule game, how I pick the wins and losses for each team, every single team in the NFL. And from there, I made predictions based off who's going to win each division, who's going to make the playoffs, and who eventually will win the Super Bowl. So I started things off with the NFC, and that's where we're going to get things started today in the NFC. So let's get to it. So obviously we had already made our way through the NFC West in my last video, and full transparency, there were a couple of mistakes in that video where I had teams both losing the same game and making the scheduled game. So I did kind of go through it and revamp it a little bit. Things are mainly still the same in that division, but I still wanted to at least kind of touch on it before we moved on to the other divisions in the NFC. So let's take a look and kind of summarize what I had and how I had that division shaking out this upcoming season. So like I said, just to recap, I had the 49ers finishing number one in the division, right? I had them with an 11-6 record, going 3-3 in the division, and going an overall 8-4 within the conference itself. And in second place, I had the Arizona Cardinals finish with a 10-7 record, 3-3 in the division, finishing with a 5-7 record within the conference. Both those teams, I believe, are going to the playoffs. I think they're going to make the playoffs. So two teams from this division. I did put a spoiler tag, and let me explain what these spoiler tags are. Teams that could spoil my prediction, literally spoil it, in a way that I'm going to use in a largely positive way, right? So, for example, the Rams have a very, very strong offense, right? When you talk about a guy like Matt Stafford, the best quarterback in the division throwing the football, when you talk about a guy like Cooper Kupp along with Puka Nacua, along with Tyler Higbee and Kyron Williams in the backfield, I think that offense is going to be high-powered. I like what they have on that side of the ball. And then you have a head coach like Sean McVay, who is an excellent head coach and does a very good job of constructing an offense. I'm definitely high on that team and what they can succeed. The 9-8 record kind of shows that positivity. I think they're going to have a winning record. I have questions about their defense. I'm not sold on that unit completely. Do like some of their draft selections, like a Jared Verse, like a Cameron Kitchens, but I'm very, very skeptical on how they're going to look coming into the year, but I'm keeping my eye on it. I'm optimistic on this team. So I'm not completely out on the Rams. I just need to see it first, but they're definitely a team that I think could spoil this prediction and, to me, maybe even take that second seed in the NFC West. So moving on to the NFC North. As far as the NFC North goes, obviously I'm super high on the Detroit Lions. I have them taking the number one seed in the division. Look, this is a team that made it all the way to the NFC Championship game last year and lost to a very good San Francisco team that ended up representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. When I look at this Detroit team, I look at Dan Campbell, right? I look at Dan Campbell and how much trust I have in him and how much trust his team has in him in general. And when I take a look at that, along with the roster, along with how they look on the offensive side of the ball with Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery, along with Jahmyr Gibbs, that two-headed monster in the backfield, along with a guy like Jamison Williams, another wide receiver as well, in addition to the fact that on that defense it's Aiden Hutchinson, along with Terrion Arnold that they just drafted. Carlton Davis, who they just traded for, and DJ Reader, who they just got in the offseason to kind of shore up the interior of that defensive line, in addition to shoring up the offensive line with a guy like Kevin Zeitler in the guard position. Look, this is a team that I think is going to take a step this year. I think this is their year to finally push past that point and maybe make the Super Bowl. We'll see how that goes this season. Then I had the Green Bay Packers finishing second in the division. This Green Bay Packers team, they're a volatile boomer bust team. Anything can truly happen. Anything with this team. But when you take a look at a guy like Jordan Love and how he finished last year, I mean, this is a quarterback that was one of the hottest quarterbacks in the NFL last year, specifically in those last 8 games where he threw for 2,026 yards, 18 touchdowns, 3 picks. These are the last 8 games, including the playoffs, right? And finished with a passer rating of 111 in his final 8 games. I mean, this is a guy that played as well as anybody, maybe the hottest quarterback in the NFL at that point. If he can carry that over into this season, if he can maneuver and continue to build a chemistry with that receiver core, that young receiver core, I mean, this is a team that could be very good for a long time. In addition to the fact they got Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, getting him to me is such a key acquisition. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's an all-pro, a 2-time Pro Bowler. In his 6 seasons, has 3 seasons in which he's rushed for over 1,000 yards, in addition to the fact that he's averaged 4.2 yards per carry throughout the course of his entire career. So to me, I'm definitely high on this acquisition for the Packers. I think he's going to help them tremendously in that rushing game, which was already top 15 in the league. So I definitely think getting him is a big deal. In addition to the fact that that Packers defense is always, if not right in the middle in terms of being average, good to very good. They're always there. They're always in the mix. So I trust what this Green Bay Packers team is going to look like. And I'm a believer in trends, right? With Jordan Love finishing the season the way that he did, trending upwards, I read into that, right? I give credence to it. I give credit to it. And I think that is what's going to help them this upcoming season. And I really do believe that he will be a difference maker for this team going forward. Speaking of difference makers, moving on to the Chicago Bears, this is a team that I put a spoiler tag on. This is a team that to me is very capable of making a lot of noise. When you look at this quarterback, this rookie quarterback they just drafted from USC, Caleb Williams, and this situation that he's coming into, this Chicago team is loaded at skill positions on that offensive side of the ball. I mean, in that running back room alone, you've got Khalil Herbert and the recently acquired DeAndre Swift, 2 guys that are very, very good running backs, in addition to the fact that now, in addition to having DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, you now went out and got a Keenan Allen. You now went out and got a Gerald Everett. Guys who can help take this wide receiver room, this receiving core, to an entirely new level. And that's without me even mentioning Roma Dunze. So for this Chicago Bears team, I only have 2 question marks, which are the offensive line and the defense in itself. Like, now, I see the defense definitely improved coming out of last year after the acquisition of Montez Sweat. I do like Jalen Johnson in the backfield, but I still, when I look at their overall numbers out of last year, I wasn't entirely impressed. So to me, the question is going to be, not only will Caleb Williams show up and perform, but how will that defense look coming into this year as well? And then last but not least, the team that I really feel like doesn't really warrant any discussion in the Minnesota Vikings. I have no trust in this team. I don't believe in them at all. Their schedule, I really had to squint. I really had to, kind of maneuver and force some wins for this team in order for them to even get to this 4-13. I looked at their schedule and I just don't see a whole lot of wins for them in this schedule this year. I think it's a tough schedule. A lot of the teams in the NFC have gotten better, and the teams that are going to play in the AFC are no slouches as well. So I had them going 1-5 in the division and 3-9 overall in the conference. So now moving on to the NFC South, the division that I would describe with one word, and that word is curious, right? This is a division where I think a lot of the teams in this division can make noise, right? We've seen Tampa Bay make noise and upset the Philadelphia Eagles in that wild card playoff game last year. We believe the Atlanta Falcons and the acquisitions that they made can make a change and make some noise in that division as well. And when I even take a look at the Carolina Panthers, I put a spoiler tag on them, mainly because when I look at the Carolina Panthers, one of their biggest problems was keeping Bryce Young upright, right? They were 27th in PFF pass blocking last season. So I like what they did this offseason, going out and getting Josh Nijman, Robert Hunt, and Damian Lewis. Guys that to me can help bolster that offensive line, and then in addition to that, kind of help protect Bryce Young. And look, Bryce Young, I get it. There's been a lot of hate. I personally felt like C.J. Stroud was the better quarterback coming out when the draft was happening last year. But at the same time, I don't believe that Bryce Young is an individual who can't play quarterback. I think what made him special at Alabama is still there. It can still be translated to the NFL. I think I liked C.J. more for the longevity element. I think quarterbacks with size make more sense as prospects when you're drafting them. But that doesn't mean I don't believe in Bryce Young, especially with what they did in that receiver core. Going out and getting a Deontay Johnson. Adam Thielen is still there. Drafting Xavier Leggett. This is a team I'm keeping my eye on, in addition to the fact that I do like the way their defense looks as well. So I put a spoiler tag on them. But at the end of the day, I do think that the Falcons will take this division. I think they're going to finish with a 9-8 record, 4-2 in the division, 7-5 conference record overall. When I look at this Falcons team, look, I know what their defense has, right? Jesse Bates, Grady Jarrett, along with getting a guy like Matthew Judon this past offseason, Justin Simmons as well. The defense is there. The roster is mostly there on the offensive side as well, right? Take a look at what they have in the receiver core, getting a Darnell Mooney, already having a Drake London, and even Kyle Pitts to a degree. What's always missed for this team, and I forgot to even mention Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in that backfield. What's always been missing for this team has been that quarterback position. And look, it's the hardest position to, resolve when you're building a roster, right? Because at the end of the day, not everybody can play that position. Everybody knows getting a good quarterback is very, very difficult in the NFL. And I think they got two this offseason. When you're taking a look at a guy like Kirk Cousins and what he's accomplished, I mean, just take a look at what the Falcons had playing at quarterback for them last season, a season ago, right? Both Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, who has been since released from the Arizona Cardinals, the team that the Atlanta Falcons traded him to, those two quarterbacks combined for a 61% completion percentage, 17 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions in the 17 game split between the two of them. Kirk Cousins, remember, he left last season with an Achilles injury for Minnesota. So it means he only played 8 games. In those 8 games, Kirk Cousins threw more touchdowns and less interceptions with a higher passer rating in 8 games. He threw 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 8 games for Minnesota. Granted, Minnesota was 4-4 in those games, but still to have those stats, to me, and bringing that to Atlanta, the potential is limitless for this team, not just in their division, but in the conference. I like what they have on the defensive side of the ball. I like their skill positions. Wide receiver Drake London. I like Darnell Mooney. I like Kyle Pitts. And like I said, Bijan Robinson and Algier as well. This team, all they were missing was the quarterback. And I definitely think one of the guys on that offense that's going to really, really enjoy having a quarterback like Kirk Cousins is Kyle Pitts. We're finally maybe going to see him take that step we've been expecting him to take this entire time, this entire career that he's had to this point. So I am definitely excited and intrigued by this Atlanta team. I think with an experienced quarterback like Cousins playing quarterback for them, I think he helps elevate them, maybe even potentially past the Buccaneers, which is why I had them 9-8 in this or going into this season, and 4-2 in the division. I had the Buccaneers at 8-9. 3-3 in the division, 6-6, a conference record, and then the New Orleans Saints last, 5-12. This is a team, they're perplexing, right? I don't know what to make of them, because last year, if you really look at them, they played well, right? A 9-8 record. They tied with the Buccaneers with an opportunity to make the playoffs. I think the Buccaneers had just won the head-to-head. So when it comes down to it, they're not a bad team, but when I take a look at how they look compared to the rest of the division, the rest of the conference, the schedule they're playing, I'm not high on them. I can't see more than 5 wins for this team, but I'm welcome to being surprised, especially if maybe Derek Carr has a really good year, or maybe Spencer Rattler replaces him and plays even better. So that is how I think the NFC South is going to shake out. Moving on to the NFC East. The NFC East, one of the most fascinating divisions in all of the NFL is this particular division, because realistically, all these teams, and excuse my lack of a better term, all these teams kind of have some weird vibes to them, right? If you look at the Eagles, how they closed last year was definitely something that left a bad taste in all of our mouths. The Dallas Cowboys, the same thing could be said of them with how they ended last season, losing to Green Bay the way that they did in Dallas at Jerry World. In addition to the fact that they had the whole CD Lamb contract dispute that was recently resolved. Micah Parsons still wants his contract. Dak Prescott still needs to get paid. They really didn't do much this offseason as it pertains to improving the rest of the roster. It's kind of a little bit of a confused state, if you will, the way that I look at the Dallas Cowboys. And then you have the Commanders. I love what they did in terms of trying to build the defensive side of the ball, going out and getting guys like a Bobby Wagner, like a Dorrance Armstrong, like a Dante Fowler Jr. These guys that I think will definitely help improve that defensive side of the ball. I know Bobby Wagner's lost a step or two, but I still think he can play. And I do like Dante Fowler Jr. and Dorrance Armstrong, guys that were on that stout Cowboys defense a season ago. So I like what they did, in addition to also getting Austin Eckler. Look, I know he's a little past his time as well, but I also still think he can contribute. I also like them getting Nick Algoretti along with getting Tyler Biadasz as well, So I like what they did in terms of the rest of the roster on that team. And then drafting Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels is kind of the wild card to a degree to me. When I look at what he can bring to this team, I have been impressed with what I've seen in preseason. I wasn't high on him in this draft process, but at the same time, I didn't really know what to make of how good he could or could not be. So I'm still skeptical about how good he can be, which is why I put the spoiler tag there. I do think that the Commanders could actually maybe even steal this division. I actually think that's a possibility if Jayden Daniels can play as well as I think he can, but at the same time, I'm still not confident in that fact. So at the end of the day, I had the NFC West, or NFC East, shake out a little bit like this, with the Philadelphia Eagles winning the division. I think they're going to start slow. I think there's going to be a little bit of a hangover as it pertains to how last season ended, and I think they're going to start slow, but still finish strong. Finish with a 10-7 record, 4-2 in the division, 7-5 in the conference. I think the Dallas Cowboys will have a very good finish to the season as it pertains to playing within the conference, with an 8-4 record in the conference, 4-2 in the division, but also finish with a 9-8 record overall. I think the Commanders will finish at 7-10. Like I said, it very much depends on how good Jayden Daniels will be for this team. And then I believe the New York Giants will finish 5-12. Look, I thought they would finish with more losses, but at the end of the day, I love their defense. I think their defense is very good, especially that defensive line. I think they have a lot going for them there. I'm not high on Daniel Jones. I really like Malik Neighbors, but we're going to see how good that team actually can be. I don't think this is going to go well for them offensively, and I do think this might be Daniel Jones's last season in New York. But that wraps up what I've got for these divisions, looking at how I think the playoffs are going to shake out. Giving a quick recap to how I believe the NFC will look this season. So starting in the NFC West, I believe the 49ers are going to finish first, the Cardinals will finish second, the Rams will finish third, and the Seahawks will finish fourth, with the Cardinals and the 49ers making the playoffs. As it pertains to the NFC North, I have the Lions and the Green Bay Packers going to the playoffs, with the Lions finishing first in the division, the Packers finishing second, the Bears finishing third, and the Vikings finishing last. In the NFC South, I have the Falcons finishing first, the Buccaneers finishing second, the Panthers finishing third, and the Saints finishing fourth, with the Falcons being the lone team to go to the postseason in that division. And then I have in the NFC East, the Eagles finishing first, the Cowboys finishing second, the Commanders finishing third, and the Giants finishing last, with the Eagles and the Cowboys being the playoff teams in the NFC East. So let's see how I think the playoffs themselves are going to play out. So the way I'm looking at the actual postseason in itself to shake out, I had the 49ers with the number one overall seed, because at the end of the day, they do play the Lions head-to-head, and I think they do win that game. I'm predicting them to win that game this season, so I think that means they will have the number one seed. Although they tied in record, the 49ers winning that head-to-head would give them that number one seed, so they'll get that first week bye, I think, in the postseason. The Lions, I think, will open the postseason against the Dallas Cowboys in Detroit. I expect them to win that. I expect the Philadelphia Eagles and the Arizona Cardinals to face off as well in the other wild card game, in which I believe the Eagles will take it in Philly and redeem themselves in last year's postseason. And then finally, the way I see it, I think the Falcons and the Green Bay Packers will square off in Atlanta, and I like Green Bay in a very, very close game to take that one and to move on, which means Green Bay would then move on to play San Francisco at Levi Stadium in San Francisco for the divisional. I believe they can win that game, and I believe they will win that game. So I believe Green Bay will take it. As far as Philadelphia and Detroit go, I expect Detroit to take that game against Philly and then play Green Bay in the conference championship, to which I think the Detroit Lions will win the NFC in a conference game that will be a very, very close back and forth. But I'm giving it to the Detroit Lions, and I expect them to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. But those are my predictions for the NFC. Let me know what you think the NFC will look like coming into this year. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Maybe the Packers are the team to beat in the NFC. Maybe the 49ers go back to the Super Bowl again. Maybe the Philadelphia Eagles redeem themselves and go back to the Super Bowl for the second time in 2 or 3 years, excuse me. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. But until next time, we hope you keep it inside the lines.